It was dubbed the most egregious fashion faux pas in the history of the British crown. A diamond tiara, that quintessential emblem of supreme power, was pinned to the very hem of a dress. Coronation Day. A moment of absolute triumph, meticulously choreographed, every detail adhering to strict protocol. And then, out of nowhere, an absolutely unthinkable sight. The diamond tiara, explicitly designed to crown a royal head, found itself adorning the hem of a gown. Beside it, a scattering of brooches, seemingly haphazardly pinned to the skirt. What could it have been? An eccentric display, reeking of poor taste? Or a brilliantly calculated move, brimming with hidden symbols that contemporaries simply failed to decipher? Today, we'll untangle this sparkling mystery and uncover one of the most peculiar enigmas in the history of British coronation attire. Trust me, you'll be stunned when you discover the truth. Stay tuned to the very end to unveil Queen Alexandra's ultimate secret. Let's transport ourselves to 1902. Britain bids farewell to the long twilight Victorian era and with bated breath steps into a new century. A new king sits on the throne, Edward VII, and beside him, his consort, Queen Alexandra. She had waited for this moment for almost 40 years, and now that it had arrived, she had no intention of following anyone else's rules. This wouldn't be just a coronation. This would be the birth of a new style, the Edwardian era, synonymous with luxury and elegance. And the principal architect of this day was Alexandra herself. The daughter of a Danish king, raised in rather modest circumstances, she, like her sister, the Russian Empress Maria Feodorovna, having tasted grandeur, embraced it wholeheartedly. Over her many years as Princess of Wales, Alexandra transformed from a shy foreigner into a style icon whose taste was admired across all of Europe. She collected jewels not merely as adornments, but as instruments of power, symbols of status, and personal talismans. And she approached her coronation not as a ceremony, but as the creation of the crowning masterpiece of her life. The vision was grand. Alexandra decided to personally direct the crafting of her coronation ensemble. She rejected the heavy, restrictive fabrics of the past. Upon seeing a dress made of shimmering Indian fabric on Lady Curzon, the wife of the Viceroy of India, one day she understood immediately. This was the fabric for her triumph. Light as air, golden brocade, commissioned from the very heart of the empire, was both a powerful fashion statement and a shrewd political maneuver, emphasizing Britain's bond with its jewel in the crown. The tailoring was entrusted to the greatest couturier of that era, Charles Frederick Worth, whose creations adorned all queens and empresses. On the golden canvas, British artisans embroidered the symbols of the United Kingdom: English roses, Scottish thistles, and Irish shamrocks. The dress itself was a treasure, a perfect canvas for an unparalleled exhibition of jewelry prowess. Alexandra had no intention of choosing between her favorite jewels. She decided to use them all. Her vision did not entail modesty or restraint. It envisioned the creation of an image that would stun, one that would speak volumes without words about the monarchy's immutability, its wealth, and its ancient history. Every necklace, every brooch, and even the tiara were to become part of a single, grand composition, where she herself served as both the lead jeweler and the crowning exhibit. Now let's momentarily forget about protocol and instead view this ensemble through a jeweler's eyes. What contemporaries dismissed as a mishmash was, in fact, a meticulously orchestrated cascade of light and history. This wasn't merely a collection of adornments, it was an entire jewelry score where each element played its own unique role. Starting from the summit, like the very foundation of this dazzling edifice, lay the massive coronation necklace. 25 gigantic diamonds linked into a shimmering river. This adornment had been created for Queen Victoria, and its weight was not merely physical, but profoundly symbolic. It spoke volumes of the continuity and immense power of the British Empire. Beside it, adorning her ears, special coronation earrings gleamed, the pure, cool brilliance of flawless stones. Yet, atop this classic splendor, Alexandra draped several strands of pearls. Long, almost endless sautoirs, they cascaded down the bodice, crisscrossing to create a soft, milky haze that subtly muted the icy fire of the diamonds beneath. This was her personal flourish, a nod to fashion and a testament to her unique style. Beneath these pearly waves, as if a cherished secret, lay pinned Prince Albert's famous sapphire brooch, Victoria's wedding gift. Alexandra placed this symbol of eternal love not in the most conspicuous spot, but closer to her heart, like a private, intimate talisman. Adorning the dress's shoulders, instead of traditional embroidery, diamond clusters were affixed. Connoisseurs immediately recognized them as elements from her own wedding parure. In this way, the Queen wove threads of her personal history into the coronation's very fabric, intertwining the day she became Princess of Wales with the day of her ultimate triumph. But the most audacious detail awaited further down, on the skirt of her gown. In lieu of a belt, the front of the hem was adorned with an enormous V-shaped construction of diamonds, and this was no specially crafted ornament. Alexandra, with her characteristic daring, had commanded that two antique crown necklaces be repurposed to form this pseudo-medieval girdle, and the crowning glory of this audacity was the tiara. Yes, you heard that right. Queen Adelaide's ancient sunburst tiara, an ornament destined to radiate atop a brow, was pinned to the hem. This gesture flouted every conceivable and inconceivable canon. No one before her, and no one since, has ever utilized a symbol of supreme power as a mere skirt embellishment. Completing the composition were several diamond bow brooches scattered across the fabric like fallen stars, and substantial bracelets encircling her wrists. This was not merely a display of wealth. This was a manifesto. August the 9th, 1902. Westminster Abbey held its breath in anticipation. The air was electrified not only by the solemnity of the moment, but also by a searing curiosity. The world was bidding farewell to the shadow of Queen Victoria, preparing to behold firsthand the radiance of a new Edwardian era. And then she entered. In that instant, the murmur of voices subsided, replaced by a collective gasp of astonishment. This was not merely a queen assuming her rightful place. This was an apparition. Her figure, draped in shimmering Indian gold, seemed not to walk, but to glide through the abbey's ancient arches. But the dress was not the main event. The light was. Alexandra had transformed herself into a living constellation, a river of light that flowed, shimmered, and dazzled. Every diamond, every gemstone on her ensemble caught the rays and exploded into thousands of sparks, creating a dynamic, luminous halo around the Queen. This was the grand finale of her many years as a style icon, its absolute apotheosis. On that day, she ceased to be merely a beloved princess of the people. She stood before the world as the very embodiment of the empire, rich, powerful, and absolutely confident in its right to shine brighter than all others. Jewels stopped being mere accessories. They became her armor and her manifesto. Her image spoke without words. The era of Victorian modesty and mourning was over. The time for luxury, power, and undisguised magnificence had arrived. The reaction was immediate and conflicted. Newspaper reporters, gushing with delight, struggled to find words to describe this unprecedented spectacle. The aristocracy and foreign guests whispered, dividing into two camps. Some were ineffably thrilled by the Queen's boldness and taste. Others, more conservative, were utterly shocked. A tiara on a skirt? Such a quantity of jewels all at once? It seemed an unheard-of audacity, a violation of all traditions, almost bordering on poor taste. But the most discerning observers saw beyond the sparkle, discerning a cold calculation and brilliant intuition. They understood that this was no mishmash, but a meticulously planned political statement. Gold from India, Victoria's sapphire, ancient crown jewels, all assembled into a single dazzling ensemble. It was all a visual declaration of the unity and immense wealth of the sprawling British Empire. On the day of her coronation, Alexandra didn't just wear jewels. She wore the entire might and glory of her new dominion. The coronation was merely an overture. The true golden age of this constellation of jewels, and of Alexandra herself as a style icon, unfolded during her years as queen consort. She didn't simply wear this dazzling attire once and relegate it to a vault. She lived this style. The coronation ensemble was not an exception, but the quintessence of her jewelry philosophy, which she embraced every single day. Central to her image, its distinctive signature, were high choker necklaces, or as they were commonly known, dog collars. For Alexandra, this was more than just a nod to fashion. As a child, she had sustained an injury that left a small scar on her neck. And what might have been a source of insecurity for another woman, Alexandra transformed into her greatest asset. She began wearing wide velvet bands, and then entire cascades of pearl and diamond strands closely encircling her neck. She didn't conceal the scar. She turned it into an impetus for creating a new, inimitable style that the entire world would copy. She never limited herself to just one piece of jewelry. Alexandra was a master of jewelry layering. In her surviving portraits and photographs, we see her adorned in veritable waterfalls of jewels. Over several rows of diamond and pearl chokers, she might layer several more long strands of pearls or diamond necklaces that intertwined on her chest, creating a complex yet harmonious composition. To the bodice of her dress, she would pin not one, but several brooches at once, grouping them into asymmetrical constellations. This was her style. This was her very essence. Every piece of jewelry in her hands came alive and told a story. She masterfully disassembled and reassembled antique parures, breathing new life into them. Elements of her wedding set she wore as brooches, ancient necklaces she transformed into hair ornaments, and tiaras, as we already know, she could pin to her dress. She wasn't merely a custodian of treasures, she was their co-creator, their director. It was in her hands that these jewels became not merely symbols of status, but an integral part of her personal brand. When people thought of Queen Alexandra, they envisioned this very image: a proud bearing, a kind smile, and a neck enveloped in a milky haze of pearls and the icy gleam of diamonds. She transformed her jewels into a shield against palace intrigues and her husband's infidelities, and a language through which she spoke to the world about beauty, dignity, and the enduring grandeur of the monarchy. This was her golden age, and in it she shone brighter than any of her diamonds. Behind a dazzling facade of diamonds and pearls, a life anything but a fairy tale idyll unfolded. The deepest shadow cast over Alexandra's brilliant reign was her own husband, Edward VII. His numerous affairs and romantic escapades were no secret to the court or society. While the Queen cultivated the image of an impeccable monarch, the King led the life of a playboy. And in this stark contrast, Alexandra's greatest mystery emerged. Was her passion for jewels a form of escapism? A way to compensate for a lack of personal happiness with public splendor? Whispers suggested that her jeweled armor was not only a symbol of status, but also a shield, protecting her from humiliating rumors. Each new string of pearls, every brooch, served as a silent answer to the latest gossip. Instead of staging public scandals that would only harm the monarchy, Alexandra opted for a different strategy. She became increasingly magnificent, ever more radiant, transforming herself into an unattainable ideal whom her subjects adored and the court respected. In essence, she bought the people's love and loyalty with the brilliance of her treasures, leaving her husband to his questionable amusements. Even her signature fashion trend, her famous chokers, was born from a secret. A widely known, though undocumented legend claims that in her youth, Alexandra sustained an injury that left a small scar on her neck. She did not attempt to mask it. Instead, she transformed it into the very foundation of her style. Wide dog collars of diamonds and pearls became her signature. Thus, what could have been a small secret and a source of embarrassment became the era's most resounding fashion statement. There were other, more subtle whispers. These concerned the unspoken rivalry between two sisters, Alexandra and the Russian Empress Maria Feodorovna. Both originated from the modest Danish court, and both plunged into an ocean of unprecedented luxury. And as Alexandra prepared for her coronation, keenly aware of the splendor of the Russian court and the countless treasures of the Romanovs, was her jewel-laden abundance not a kind of riposte? Did she not wish to demonstrate that the British crown yielded to none, not even the Russian? This was no open scandal, but a subtle, almost invisible thread of rivalry between two of the world's most influential women. And of course, the primary source of rumors was the coronation outfit itself. The fact remains a tiara was indeed affixed to the skirt. But its interpretation became a battlefield. Conservatives whispered of poor taste, of a coronation mishmash, and of a violation of all conceivable etiquette. Supporters, however, saw it as a stroke of genius, albeit an eccentric one. They asserted it was no mistake, but a deliberate gesture, a declaration that for the new queen, old rules simply did not apply. And this duality, this dispute between fact and its interpretation, remains the greatest mystery of that day. The golden age of Edwardian luxury, like human life itself, proved fleeting. In 1910, just 8 years after his triumphant coronation, King Edward VII passed away. For Alexandra, this was not merely the end of a reign, it was the close of an entire era, one she had personally shaped and embodied. The throne passed to her son, George V, and his consort, Queen Mary of Teck. Alexandra transitioned from reigning queen consort to Queen Mother Dowager. This shift in status was more than a mere formality. It signified a transfer of jewelry power. According to tradition, many crown jewels, which had been an integral part of Alexandra's image, were to pass to the new queen. This was a dramatic moment, a true passing of the torch. Jewels that had served Alexandra as both armor and symbols for decades now had to adorn another woman. The relationship between Alexandra and her daughter-in-law, Queen Mary, was polite but cool. Mary of Teck, a woman with encyclopedic knowledge of jewelry and a passionate collector, eagerly awaited the opportunity to wear the crown's foremost treasures. Alexandra, however, parted with her beloved pieces with visible reluctance. Negotiations regarding the transfer of the jewels were protracted, and rumor had it, not always smooth. For Alexandra, this was more than a farewell to stones and metal. It was a farewell to her role, to her power, to her radiant past. Of course, her personal collection remained with her, and she continued to wear her famous chokers and pearls. But the most iconic, the most historically significant pieces, including those that glittered on her coronation outfit, slowly migrated into the new queen's jewelry boxes. A period of life in the shadows ensued. Alexandra appeared less and less in public, and her precious sparkle gradually faded, giving way to the new, more restrained style of George V's court. The era when a queen could transform herself into a living treasure chest came to an end. The First World War was looming, and ostentatious luxury became inappropriate. Alexandra's unique ensemble of coronation jewels was dismantled. Each piece, the tiara, the brooches, the necklace, returned to its place in the royal treasury or was repurposed. The grand composition that had stunned the world in 1902 ceased to exist. It remained only in portraits and faded photographs, a monument to a bygone era of boundless optimism and dazzling brilliance. It seemed this daring image was born for just one day, to flash brightly and then disappear forever, disassembled into its individual components. Queen Adelaide's tiara returned to the vault. Prince Albert's sapphire brooch continued its glorious history, and necklaces and brooches dispersed among the royal jewelry boxes. The legendary ensemble, that very coronation mishmash, physically ceased to exist. But true masterpieces do not die. They merely slumber, awaiting their moment. Its second birth occurred not in the gleam of ballrooms, but in the quiet of archives, on the pages of books, and most significantly, in the digital space of the 21st century. With the advent of the internet, historical forums, and thematic blogs, old, faded photographs and official portraits of Queen Alexandra found new life. Millions of people around the globe could now examine in detail what was once accessible only to a select few guests at Westminster Abbey. And a new phase of understanding began. This return to the world stage was triumphant because it completely altered perception. While in 1902, contemporaries, even admiring, primarily saw a dazzling but somewhat chaotic jumble of treasures, the perspective of posterity proved far more discerning. Fashion historians, jewelry experts, and simply connoisseurs of beauty began not just to look, but to analyze. They saw not a mishmash, but an incredibly complex, multi-layered code. A new reading was deeper and more subtle. Beyond the eccentric gesture of the tiara on the skirt, people now saw not a whim, but an act of unprecedented emancipation and a declaration of self-worth. In the choice of Indian fabric, not merely a nod to fashion, but an imperial sweep. In the arrangement of brooches and necklaces, not a coincidence, but a meticulously crafted biography, where personal memories, state symbols, and dynastic relics intertwined. The perception shifted from "what is its worth" to "what does it signify?" And at this moment, the value of Alexandra's coronation ensemble reached its absolute zenith. Its cost was now measured not only in carats of diamonds, but in the gravitas of historical context. It became a classic example of how jewelry can serve as a non-verbal language of power, a personal manifesto, and a brilliant public relations coup. The forgotten incident transformed into a legend, one of the most discussed and analyzed phenomena in the history of royal jewels. So where is this treasure now, this dazzling coronation ensemble? The answer is simultaneously simple and complex, nowhere and everywhere. As a singular, complete ensemble, it ceased to exist the moment Queen Alexandra removed it after the ceremony. It was a unique, unrepeatable jewelry installation, an art object created for one single day and never meant to be replicated. It is not housed in any museum in the world. It cannot be seen in person. But its individual components, its immortal elements, live on. Queen Adelaide's radiant tiara, Prince Albert's sapphire brooch, the coronation necklace, and other key elements of that look are today part of the official British crown jewels and the monarch's private collection. They are carefully guarded in the Tower of London or Windsor Castle and occasionally appear in public, adorning new queens and princesses. But now they are worn according to protocol. They are no longer personal adornments, but inviolable state relics, each public appearance of which is a significant historical event. The true guardian of this masterpiece became history itself. Its vault is not a safe in the tower, but the archives, museums, books, and digital realm where its images reside. Official portraits by Luke Fields, the famous photographs from the W&D Downey studio, these are what preserved this moment for us. Its current status is no longer an accessory, but a historical artifact, a precedent, a classic example of jewelry storytelling and personal branding studied by fashion and art historians alike. And what is its value? To assess this ensemble in monetary terms is impossible because its value is not derived from carats. It is the value of a historical moment, the zenith of the British Empire's power. It is the value of one woman's audacity, defying centuries-old traditions. It is the value of Charles Worth's genius, who created the perfect canvas. It is the value of a political message woven from gold, diamonds, and symbols. The true worth of this ensemble is intangible and therefore absolute. So, let's return to the question where all this began. Brooches and a tiara on a skirt. A coronation mishmash or a stroke of genius? After everything we've learned, the answer becomes crystal clear. It was neither a mistake nor a coincidence, nor, least of all, a display of poor taste. It was an act of the highest jewelry theatre, where Queen Alexandra served as both director and lead actress, and indeed, the very drama itself. Behind this apparent chaos lay an ironclad logic. The logic of a woman who had perfectly mastered the language of jewels. In this language, she told the world everything, of the unwavering might of the British crown, of her personal history, from elements of her wedding parure to Queen Victoria's talisman, and of the imperial ambitions of an empire whose gold arrived from India. This ensemble was more than a mere declaration of wealth. It was a coded history of an era meant to be read, not merely observed. Ultimately, this story is not so much about the stones, but about Alexandra. About a woman who, facing personal dramas and the coldness of royal protocol, found her unique way to make her statement. She transformed her vulnerability, an alleged scar on her neck, into the defining fashion statement of the century. She transformed her role as queen consort into a springboard for timeless style. These jewels were her voice, her armor, and her canvas. The spectacle she unveiled that day proves one simple truth. Magnificent jewels are never merely pretty baubles. They are vessels where time crystallizes and human passions and ambitions coalesce. Within the facets of these diamonds, one could glimpse not only the flickering candles of Westminster Abbey, but also the sweeping pride of an empire, the unspoken rivalry between sisters, and the quiet resilience of one queen. The coronation gown has long been a museum piece. The unique ensemble was dismantled into its components and never again pieced back together. But the legend born on that August day proved more resilient than gold and more unyielding than diamond. It stood as testament that true masterpieces aren't measured in carats or the clarity of their stones. They are measured by the sheer power of the story they tell. And in this sense, Queen Alexandra's coronation mishmash stands as one of the most priceless and immortal treasures in history.